Welcome to the Georgia Legal Services Program's Rural Justice Poverty Summit. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about the important and impactful housing work we do each day. As a housing unit director, I have the good fortune to work with GLSP staff located throughout Georgia. We seek to address the housing needs of our client population. Today, I will highlight just a part of our housing work. Our housing work is guided by a quote from Matthew Desmond from his book, Evicted: Poverty and Profit in the American City. The quote, "Eviction is a cause, not just a condition of poverty," motivates and guides our housing work. By working to prevent evictions, our attorneys and paralegals further GLSP's mission of creating equal access to justice and opportunities out of poverty.
An eviction results in more than the loss of a family's home. A family that is evicted loses all or most of their personal property: clothes, furniture, electronics, all items that will be needed and replaced. Often, families lose important documents such as car titles, insurance policies, immunization records, birth and wedding certificates. Think of everything in your home being removed and placed haphazardly in your front yard, unprotected from the elements and vulnerable to third parties. That is what happens in an eviction. We once had a client who was wrongfully evicted, and while we were able to help him return to his home, he still had to see his neighbor use his grill and watch the neighborhood children ride his children's bikes.
For children, the instability caused by eviction can result in worse outcomes in education, physical and mental health, and even their future earnings. Eviction disrupts children's routines and sense of security and often causes families to separate. It often results in children having to change schools, which can cause lower educational achievement even years after the eviction. A recent Fragile Family study found that 1 in 7 children living in US cities have been evicted by the time they turn 15.
For adults, an eviction can also result in the loss of employment due to the disruption caused by appearing in court to file an answer and later for the court hearing. And if the eviction is granted, by the need to quickly secure and move to new housing. Further, evictions are public documents. Having an eviction in your past makes it far more difficult for you to find new rental housing. Once evicted, a family will often relocate to less desirable housing, both in the terms of housing quality and neighborhood environment.
Evictions negatively impact the local community as well. With evictions often clustered in lower income neighborhoods, the social connections between neighbors are frayed by high eviction rates. Evictions and the resulting homelessness imposes both direct and indirect costs on local communities in the form of emergency shelter expenses, inpatient and emergency medical expenses, foster care, and juvenile delinquency.
The speed of eviction actions leaves little time for a tenant to resolve the non-payment and prepare to relocate. In Georgia, a landlord can demand the tenant vacate and file an eviction as soon as the rent is past due. Once served, the tenant has 7 days to file their answer. If an answer is not filed, the order for eviction, the writ of possession, can be issued and executed on the 8th day after service. If an answer is filed, the hearing is scheduled quickly. In Whitfield County, where I work, the court schedules the hearing while the tenant is in the office filing their answer. The hearing is often held the day after the answer is filed. If a tenant loses at their hearing, they have 7 days after the judgment is entered to appeal or be evicted. To remain in possession while the appeal is pending, the tenant must pay all past due rent the court found was owed and the monthly rent moving forward.
With the expiration of the CDC moratorium on evictions for non-payment on August 1st, GLSP immediately saw an increase in calls from tenants in the process of being evicted. The modified CDC moratorium that went into effect on August 3rd provided relief from the tsunami of evictions, but required GLSP to educate judges on its existence and scope. In August, it was estimated that 22% of Georgia renters, or roughly 340,000 households, were behind on their monthly rent payment and at risk of eviction.
Before the pandemic, there was an eviction crisis in Georgia, and there will be an eviction crisis after the pandemic ends. As long as there's a lack of affordable housing for low-income families, there will be an eviction crisis. A quarter of Georgia rental households have a household income that is classified as extremely low income. The majority of these households are at risk of eviction because they are severely cost burdened, spending more than half of their income on housing. Severely cost burdened households are more likely than other renters to sacrifice other necessities like healthy food and healthcare to pay the rent, and to experience unstable housing and eviction.
According to the National Low Income Housing Coalition, the fair market rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in Georgia is $1,010. To afford rent and utilities without paying more than 30% of the household income each month, a household must earn $3,366 monthly or $40,398 annually. Georgians who work a minimum wage job need to work 107 hours a week to afford a 2-bedroom rental home. To afford a 1-bedroom rental, they would need to work 92 hours per week at minimum wage.
Prior to the pandemic, it was estimated that Georgia needed close to 200,000 new units of affordable housing to meet the need of the state's 340,000 renter households with extremely low incomes. Without these new housing units, GLSP's client population will continue to be at risk of eviction due to the high percentage of their income spent on housing. Any unexpected expense, such as a medical bill or car repair, or a loss of income due to illness or loss of work hours, can result in the inability to pay rent, and these renters can face eviction.
The Georgia Legal Services Program serves 154 counties in Georgia. There are only 159 counties. The remaining 5 are served by the Atlanta Legal Aid Society. GLSP's service area includes all of rural Georgia, as well as several small and mid-sized cities. Rural Georgia is defined by the government as the 124 counties that aren't part of Metro Atlanta or one of the other 13 hub cities scattered across the state. The estimated population of rural citizens in Georgia is 1.8 million.
Rural residents face unique challenges, including access to good jobs, transportation, healthcare, as well as housing that is either unaffordable or not in good condition for families to live in. Small manufacturing jobs have dried up in some areas. Across the state, modernization means fewer people are working at agriculture. According to a report from Georgia State University's Center for State and Local Finance, rural Georgia has the lowest job growth in the state relative to its population growth.
Given the level of poverty in rural Georgia, it is not surprising that 33% of rural children live in poverty, compared to 21% of urban children. In Georgia, 1 in 3 rural children are growing up in poverty. Children that live in poverty are at a greater risk of eviction and long-term negative impacts on their education and physical and mental health.
The legal services provided by GLSP are designed to meet the needs of our client population. While legal representation in court or when negotiating with an adverse party is essential, our limited resources prevent us from representing every tenant that seeks our assistance. Through our advice line, we provide legal advice and brief services, such as a call to the landlord or to the court, for those tenants we cannot represent or who only need legal advice. To meet our clients' needs, we recently added housing navigators to assist tenants applying for rental assistance through the Georgia Rental Assistance Program operated by the Department of Community Affairs. The housing navigators allow us to assist tenants in obtaining payment of past due arrearages and often future rent. Their work allows us to prevent evictions and further housing stability.
GLSP is committed to educating our client population so they can make informed decisions. During the pandemic, we used technology and social media to provide tenants with information on the rapidly changing legal landscape. We held Zoom-based webinars on the CDC order, created videos explaining the judicial emergency's impact on evictions, participated in an AARP teletown hall on rental assistance, and participated in several Zoom-based events on general landlord-tenant topics. We also use a group email program to keep clients informed on the multiple CDC order extensions and to provide information on rental assistance programs.
Attorneys primarily represent clients in magistrate court, the court in which most eviction actions are filed. We regularly appear in superior court when we seek injunctive relief, such as when there has been a self-help eviction or utilities have been turned off illegally. When we seek equitable relief or when appealing a magistrate court decision.
When litigating before Georgia's appellate courts or in federal courts, we focus on cases that address systemic issues faced by our client population. These cases generally involve asserting the particular rights and protections afforded to tenants in subsidized rental housing. GLSP has a long history of appellate advocacy, and many of the cases our housing attorneys rely on today were brought by former GLSP attorneys.
We also serve our client population by bringing media attention to the issues that affect them. We also use local media to reach our clients when the law changes. Being a statewide program representing tenants throughout Georgia, GLSP is frequently sought after by national, statewide, and local media. We use these opportunities to raise awareness of the issues faced by our clients, and particularly during the pandemic, to communicate essential information to our client populations.
The Georgia Legal Services Program does not engage in political action or political lobbying. However, we are often asked to testify before legislative committees to share our knowledge and experience on housing matters. Most recently, GLSP's Housing Unit Director was invited to testify before the Georgia legislature on the retaliation tenants face when they requested needed repairs to their rental homes. The legislature passed the proposed legislation into law, and now tenants are protected from retaliation when they request repairs.
Currently, attorneys in each GLSP office handle cases for tenants in subsidized rental housing. Our eviction prevention project attorneys focus on private rental housing in their designated counties. Our advice line provides advice and brief services to tenants in private rental housing throughout the state. And our housing navigators in our rental assistance unit help tenants applying for rental assistance through the Georgia Rental Assistance Program.
GLSP's work representing tenants in subsidized housing is essential to our eviction prevention mission. That's because subsidized housing is often the only source of well-maintained affordable housing in the area where our clients live. These tenants are protected from termination unless they commit a lease violation that warrants termination. And as such, it is essential to preserve these tenancies when threatened with unjustified termination. Attorneys in all of our regional offices handle these cases. In collaboration with our family law unit, we also assist victims of domestic violence who are seeking protection from termination under the Federal Violence Against Women Act, which is applicable to all federally subsidized housing.
In 2019, our Savannah office represented several tenants in a federally subsidized complex who were subject to harassment by other tenants motivated by their race. These African-American women were subject to racial slurs, physical threats, stalking, harassment at work, and were the subject of false reports to the police. Despite submitting dozens of complaints to the property's local and corporate management, no action was taken against the tenants engaging in the harassment. The GLSP attorney investigated and documented the harassment and submitted a Fair Housing Act complaint for each client with the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. We also represented the tenants during the administrative conciliation process. Each of GLSP's 3 clients received $20,000 in damages, and the complex agreed to change its policies and procedures to ensure any future complaints of racial harassment would be properly addressed.
Because GLSP's housing work is funded primarily by LSC, it is particularly vulnerable when there is a decrease in funding. In response to funding cuts in 2009, GLSP ceased representing tenants of private landlords to focus our limited resources on subsidized housing. Fortunately, in 2017, GLSP received a multi-year grant to fund its eviction prevention project, which allowed us to focus on private landlord-tenant cases. EPP has an attorney in 9 of GLSP's regional offices, along with 3 advice line attorneys. The EPP attorneys work as a unit within GLSP, as well as being members of their local office.
My first year in the Brunswick office, I represented a client in magistrate court to set aside a writ of possession, an eviction order that was obtained on false pretenses and used to remove my client from his home. He purchased the home a year before in an informal cash sale, and he invested everything he had rehabilitating it so it was livable. The seller falsely claimed he was a tenant to obtain the writ of possession. I was able to have the eviction order set aside, and my client was able to return to his home. Our counterclaim for specific performance of the sales contract was transferred to Superior Court, and our client was awarded title to the home. Our claims for damages resulting from the wrongful eviction, including the loss of our client's personal property, was tried to a jury, and the jury returned a significant damages award.
As an eviction prevention attorney in Richmond County, I appear in the magistrate court on a regular basis. Prior to the project beginning, tenants were rarely represented in dispossessory actions. When I began appearing in magistrate court, the judges were initially unappreciative of my legal arguments. However, as I became a regular fixture of their courts, the judges became more receptive to my legal arguments. In fact, a community forum we sponsored on landlord-tenant issues, one of the magistrate court judges spoke and pointed me out in his comments, stating that I was a local expert on landlord-tenant law. It's been quite a change in only a couple of years.
The advice line has proven to be an efficient and effective way to provide legal advice and brief services to tenants of private landlords. When the CDC order went into effect on September 4th, 2020, the advice line was essential to GLSP's response. To date, the advice line has assisted over 400 clients by identifying if they were protected under the CDC order and providing them with a copy of the affidavit, guidance on how to deliver it to the landlord, and how to inform the court that they were asserting its protections. In 2020, the advice line closed more than 700 cases.
I started my employment with GLSP working on the advice line in the summer of 2020. When the CDC moratorium on evictions for non-payment went into effect, the advice line saw a dramatic increase in calls. Initially, many of the calls were from tenants who had been to court, lost, and were waiting on law enforcement to execute the writ of possession and remove them from their homes. In these cases, we would provide the tenant with a CDC affidavit and a motion to file with the court, explaining that they were protected under the CDC eviction moratorium and asking for the eviction to be stayed. While the call volume was high, this was rewarding work because I was able to help clients avoid imminent eviction. In several cases, law enforcement was literally at the client's door, and we were able to stop the eviction.
GLSP has been creative and innovative in its approach to meeting the housing needs of our client population. We did that when we created the Eviction Prevention Project, and again, when we created our rental assistance unit. Because there are a few defenses to an eviction action based on non-payment of rent, GLSP realized that rental assistance would be vital to preventing evictions.
When Congress allocated funding for rental assistance at the end of 2020, GLSP immediately reached out to the Department of Community Affairs, the agency that would be administering the funds. DCA at that time was seeking to implement a statewide program that would accept applications through a web-based portal. We voiced our concern that the web-based portal, with the requirement that tenants convert documents into an electronic form and upload them into their application, would be a barrier to our clients accessing rental assistance.
As a result, DCA and GLSP partnered to fund 8 housing navigator positions to assist tenants in filing applications for the Georgia Rental Assistance Program and navigating them through the approval process. GLSP also received funding to provide legal assistance to these tenants to prevent their eviction while the rental assistance application was pending. These attorneys also ensure that once the rental assistance is received, it is properly credited to the tenant's account and that any pending legal actions are dismissed. The program began in March of 2021, and as of early August 2021, the Housing Navigators have assisted clients in accessing more than $750,000 in rental assistance.
I speak for all of GLSP's housing navigators who, despite our high caseload, find our work remarkably rewarding. Every week we have clients receive rental assistance awards that pay their past due rent, preventing them from being evicted. Knowing that we help these tenants receive a fresh start, and in some cases, future rental assistance is very rewarding. Experiencing firsthand how complicated the application process can be, I know my clients would not have been able to complete the process without GLSP's assistance.
I appreciate the opportunity to highlight just some of the housing work GLSP's dedicated staff of attorneys and paralegals engage in each day. We appreciate your support as we continue our work of preventing evictions and securing safe and stable housing for our clients.